Hello there. Thank you for joining Roosevelt University for this Lifelong Laker Learning webinar. These webinars are designed for alumni, students, and the community to continue learning beyond the classroom and beyond graduation. My name is Brittany Risley, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni and Donor Engagement here at Roosevelt. I'm a very proud alumna, and I'll be dropping my contact information in the chat box if you'd like to chat more about the alumni program here. I would now like to introduce our speakers for this webinar, Micah Spangler and Sam Hansel. At the UN Foundation, Micah Spangler is the Director of Advocacy and Humanitarian Affairs. He engages across Congress and the executive branch to strengthen U.S. political and financial support for the UN's work around the world. In addition to his advocacy efforts in Washington, Micah has extensive field experience organizing fact-finding missions to observe UN security, health, and development work in South Sudan, the Central African Republic, Mali, Niger, Madagascar, and many, many more. Micah graduated magna cum laude from Johns Hopkins University with an MA in government and received an honors bachelor's in political science and philosophy from Roosevelt University. And I'd also like to introduce Sam Hansel. Sam graduated from Roosevelt University in 2011 with a BA in political science and a minor in journalism. After graduation, Sam worked approximately 5 years on a variety of political campaigns across Illinois as a field organizer, regional field director, and campaign manager. Sam earned his JD from the John Marshall Law School in 2019, where he served as president of the Labor and Employment Law Student Group, an articles editor on the Review of Intellectual Property Law, and competed in 2 moot court competitions as a semi-finalist. He is admitted to practice law in Illinois and in Indiana and before some federal courts. Sam worked as a law clerk and then associate attorney for 3 years at a law firm representing labor unions, employees, and multi-employer benefit funds before becoming in-house counsel to the Service Employees International Union Local 73. All right, now I'd like to give you a quick session overview. Today's webinar will be interactive. We will be watching your questions on the comment boxes. We are going to be exploring Micah and Sam's careers in advocacy and how their experiences can be applied to influence policymakers and thought leaders. Just a friendly reminder, please do drop your comments throughout the webinar. They will be addressed either at the end or ongoing. All right, with that, let's start our questions here. So Sam and Micah, maybe Micah, you can start. Can you briefly describe your professional experience and what you're doing in the workplace now?
Sure. And Brittany, thank you for organizing this. And Sam, it's awesome to be here with you. And even more importantly, I love the title of this, Lifelong Lakers. Just a quick little background of my time at Roosevelt. When I was at Roosevelt, I graduated in 2007. Being a Laker really wasn't a thing. And I was on the student government, and part of the thing that we were trying to do was kind of bring back athletics to Roosevelt that had been gone for many decades. And we petitioned the President Chuck Middleton to help support us. And we started a couple intramural clubs to just kind of show that there was an appetite there. And I remember, if anyone remembers going to the Herman Crown Center, going into the locker of the gym of the Herman Crown Center and finding a box of really old Roosevelt Lakers jerseys, basketball jerseys. And so it's just so cool what you guys have done. And now to be D2, and it's just amazing. So to create that community, thank you for doing that. It's just amazing to see how much everything's changed and grown. So thanks again for that. Again, my name's Micah. I work at the United Nations Foundation. When I graduated from Roosevelt, I actually moved with a fellow Roosevelt alum that studied poli-sci at DC, and started working at a management company here doing advocacy and government relations outreach, mainly in the healthcare space. And studied part-time at Johns Hopkins while I was working in grad school, and then ended up getting a job on the Romney campaign in 2012, where I worked during the primaries, actually in Illinois and then Wisconsin, and then the general election in South Florida, setting up Republican Party of Florida field offices along with the Romney Victory Fund. So that was really rewarding. And then I came back to DC after that and started the foundation. And so I've been here now for 10 years. And my work, I think, is quite interesting. It's always changing. And basically, sum it up in a simple way is we're constantly working with members of Congress and congressional staff to help them understand the value of the UN's work and the importance of a strong US-UN partnership. For some people, that may be, very evident. For many others, it's not. And so we're at every juncture trying to emphasize the role that the UN plays in helping vulnerable people, delivering humanitarian assistance, but also norm-setting work that is really kind of goes, under the radar often. And so we serve as a resource and a kind of best friend of the UN here in Washington to help educate members and staff about the UN's work. It kind of varies every day what we do, and I'm happy to talk about that a little bit later as we get to more of the questions.
Thank you, Micah. Sam, how about you? What are you up to these days?
So again, Brittany, thank you for hosting the event and having me here. I graduated in in the fall of 2011. It was, if I'm not mistaken, the semester before the tower opened. It goes without saying that after I left or graduated, things became very different. And when I came by recently to visit, I was really just in awe of how much the school has grown and what it's become. And so, it's part of me kind of wants to or wishes that I was perhaps at Roosevelt, more recently and at a more recent time, so I can, experience what, you are all getting the benefit of, because it looks fantastic. I graduated in 2011, as Brittany mentioned, with a degree in political science, and I had always been very political and wanted to work for at least a long while on campaigns, and I got to do that for about 5 years or so, and it was really fun. I got to meet people from all over the city and the county and frankly the state, as I lived in Springfield for 6 months during that period and working on a gubernatorial campaign, and got to travel all over the place and meet folks all over, and I met some of my closest friends doing that kind of work, and I really loved it. As I got a little bit older, I wanted to do something that was a little bit more, first of all, quite bluntly, a little bit more stable. I wanted to, really push myself intellectually. And law school is something that had always been in the back of my mind. So I came back to the South Loop for school once again, and went to the John Marshall Law School, which many of you may know is now part of UIC, something that also happened after I graduated. And, I kept an open mind while I was there, but I was really interested in labor law. It's a very niche area of practice. I think there's only about probably under 100 attorneys in the state who do what I do, at least on the union side. There's many more who represent management. So it's a very niche area of practice, and it's, I got to work with a lot of unions when I worked on political campaigns. So it's something that I just took a personal interest in. And like I said, I kept an open mind in law school, but nothing really was there wasn't really an area of law or practice that I found, interesting enough to kind of knock me off the interest in labor. And so here I am. So I worked for 3.5 years as a law clerk, and then eventually as an attorney at a firm representing unions before I moved on to work for SEIU 73. And briefly, a little bit about that. So I've been here for a little over 2.5 years now, and it's truly wonderful. I get to wake up every day advocating for folks who really, I think, need the representation. We are a union of about 34,000 members. That includes people who, card carrying members, plus folks that we represent because, they're covered by contracts that we, administer. We are a union of predominantly public sector employees in the fields of education and healthcare, but we certainly go beyond that as well. We have lots of private sector members and social service agencies and higher education, and then we have a variety of employees and lots of other just occupations. We've got firefighters, librarians, security officers. We are all over the place, and it's a really great thing to do because one of the parts of my job that I love the most is learning about all of the different, learning about other people's jobs and what they do, and learning about, the technical aspects and requirements of them. We represent people who work at the zoo, so I've learned about taking care of animals, so it's all over the place. That's really enjoyable. So I do a lot of litigation in terms of representing the union in arbitrations, outside of court, a lot of stuff before federal and state administrative agencies, occasional visits to court, and then lots of internal compliance issues and, advising the union on internal issues and, providing trainings on all kinds of stuff where there might be a legal component to them. So that about sums it up. It's, in a nutshell, it's really enjoyable, rewarding work. And, it's always, the best feeling is always, having, when somebody gets their job back after they were wrongfully terminated, or they get pay that they were entitled to, and just seeing how much it changes their lives is, really rewarding.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to say thank you for both of you sharing a little bit of walk down memory lane with your Roosevelt experiences. That was really lovely to hear. As a alumna myself, I share in some of those memories, being here before the time of sports, and before I was here, I graduated the year that the tower or the Wabash building was open. So I'm with you. Thank you for sharing about your background. I think we can move into the next question here. Micah, if you want to start us off, how would you define advocacy as a term? And then generally in your career, how is that applied?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, my job here is director of advocacy, but we have a lot of different colleagues that work on different components of that and different issues and themes. I work particularly on the US-UN relationship, and it's really about getting information and resources to people that need it, policymakers that need it. We kind of serve as a first stop, hopefully working with our UN colleagues here in DC to make sure that when someone has a question about the UN, the work it does, or even, why isn't it doing this, or why can't it do that we get that to them quickly and help them understand often the broader context and the nuance in which the UN works. So it's really about getting information and facts to members and staff. The UN is a large bureaucracy, as everyone can rightfully knows, and so it can sometimes be hard to navigate that, to get an answer to a question that maybe a member or a staffer has about some arcane little part of the system, or even some big prominent thing that the UN is involved in that's generating headlines. And so that's kind of a large role we play. And you mentioned earlier the trips. That's one kind of important tool that the foundation has, where we take policymakers out of DC and we bring them to see the UN's work up close and in person. And this is a form of education, but also at the end of the day, it helps them understand the work to be themselves better advocates. The next time someone says something about the UN or a random bill or amendment or et cetera, there's a lot of different examples. When that comes up, they can kind of reference a personal experience where they saw the UN in a really often tough environment, or really challenging, fragile context, and they can understand the work they do, and particularly the work they do, getting humanitarian resources and aid to really vulnerable people, to helping people that, if it wasn't for the UN being there, they wouldn't have any other lifeline. I mean, they are, for a lot of part of the world, the 911 service. And so making that real for them is a big part of our advocacy, so they can kind of take those experiences back to DC and educate themselves, but also their colleagues.
Great, thank you. Sam?
So lawyers are by definition advocates. That is what we do. I feel very strongly about, when I take on a matter or a case, I try to, approach it in a manner to provide the best possible result for them, as if it was for myself or, a family member or a friend. I like to think that I do or try to do everything that I can do to represent folks, within the bounds of what is ethical and legal. And oftentimes that involves being creative and coming up with, thinking outside the box and being able to, aggressively pursue, relief or remedies or, for people in a way that I think is going to, best meet their needs and what they are seeking to gain out of the matter that has been assigned or referred to me. Oftentimes, it's not necessarily the end result. It's often figuring out ways to make sure that evidence gets into the record in a creative way. I once had a case where a person, was testifying and was claiming falsely that the person had a tattoo on a certain part of their body, and which was relevant to the case because it went to the credibility. And so I had to, I looked at the person, I realized like this person doesn't have a tattoo on their foot. So I ended up taking a video with my own cell phone at the last second in recording and showing that there's no tattoo on their foot. And then I introduced that as evidence, and the attorney for the employer, flew off the handle. But I said, so what, it got in. So it's just, there's different things you have to do to just be aggressive and not just rest on your laurels all the time, by preparing for cases ahead of time and just saying, well, I've got everything I need. I mean, there's a constant need to aggressively, advocate for, people in, whatever proceeding I might be, working in. And so, being able to, I think, I measure the quality of my work not by whether or not I necessarily win a case or not, because there are some cases that are just inherently an uphill climb. And, you can be doing this work for 4 years or 50 years, you're not going to win it. The question is, did you do everything that you could? And can you tell that to yourself honestly? And, if the answer is yes, then I feel like, I've done a good job on something and advocated well for them, even if, I end up getting an unfavorable decision, because it just happens. So
that's right. Okay, great. Our next question may apply more to Micah's efforts, but Sam, feel free to draw from past experience or pass. But we'll start with Micah. How do you work with volunteers and grassroots organizations to mobilize support for your campaigns?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. That's actually a big part of what the UN Foundation is all about. It's kind of, core to our DNA. And so we have a number of campaigns and initiatives that have a ton of kind of grassroots mechanisms. The one that I work with probably the closest is something called UNA USA, which is the United Nations Association of the USA. And there's a couple of chapters in Chicago, actually. And UNA is 20,000 plus grassroots member organization, 200 some odd chapters. Many of them are now on college campuses. Others are kind of the more traditional membership organization where it's, retirees or, mid professionals that get together. But UNA is kind of fills a really important role in that. When you think about the UN, often there isn't, a natural constituency of voters that support the UN or maybe think to support the UN. There's a number of professions and organizations and trade associations and professional societies that, represent their members or their interests, whether it's climate change or I'm a nurse or I'm a firefighter, perhaps, as Sam was saying. But there isn't sort of that natural fit sometimes with the UN. So UNA fills that role. And we really, mobilize and activate them and empower them to be the voice, perhaps the lone voice in their town or district or whatever it may be, to say, hey, I really care about, international affairs or foreign policy or multilateralism. And I think it's important to be, a supporter of the UN because of X, Y, Z, whatever those million different reasons that they personally have are. And so we activate them and empower them to do that often. And they're really an amazing group. And kind of our biggest event is in DC at least is we bring them once a year to do an advocacy day, a lobby day, where they come to Washington and they have their annual meeting, but then they also spend a day on Capitol Hill talking to their members of Congress or their, the congressional staff and saying, hey, I came from XYZ place. And sometimes it's very far away and they come on their own dime and they do so because they're really passionate about, the future of the world and the country. And so they have that opportunity to kind of make their case. So we're constantly organizing and mobilizing them for that. And then as every, crisis emerge or new issue or topic or, could be AI or, human rights in XYZ country, to kind of empower them and give them resources to make sure that their members of Congress, the congressional staff that represent them or work in their district or state, they're able to communicate with them, effectively and get their points across.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sam, do you want to speak to this question?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
All right, great.
So I think going, before my law career, when I was an organizer on campaign, I learned that I think the true measure of, skill as an organizer is the ability to get other folks to do your job for you and to organize yourself out of a job. And you do that by, you find out who's interested in, when you mobilize support, whether it's for a political candidate or for a contract campaign when negotiating a collective bargaining agreement, or trying to organize a group of employees to unionize, then you identify the folks who are volunteers who are who have leadership capacity, who have passion, who have interest, and you empower them to organize others on your behalf. And it's what's known as the it's what's known as the snowflake effect. I realize that term has gone on to mean other things in today's discourse, but it has nothing to do with that at all. It's called that because it involves the ability to spread and branch out and create a multi-layered system where folks are organizing each other. Because if you're just one person sitting there calling everybody and directly managing everybody, you're not going to get a lot done. And that's not an effective means of organizing. And the ability to get others to organize for you and to get these, these super volunteers, these, to help you form a grassroots organization, your ability to talk to more, the output that you are able to produce is going to increase exponentially. And, you also empower others in the process. You teach them how to advocate for themselves, which is, it's an incredibly important and long-lasting ability to be able to instill in people, and you get better results, and you're able to move mountains eventually when you do that. And I think that applies when you're working on something like a political campaign or issue advocacy. And even though it's not really my job at the union to, as a union organizer, because I'm, one of their attorneys, I see it up close every day because I work with the organizers every day. And, I'm able to, see how they do their work and help them, when necessary. More on that later. And, that's how it works there, too, when we, find out who our stewards are in our bargaining units and empower them to enforce the contracts on their own, act as, the representatives when somebody gets pulled into a meeting and can get in trouble, to negotiate their agreements, and so on and so forth. And, that makes every organizer's job a lot easier, and they can spend all their time, managing the, the organizers that, are on the ground rather than doing the work themselves. And, it's like learning how to walk and standing on your own 2 feet in a way. And I think that's really, really critical.
Yeah. Follow up to this question. What challenges do you typically encounter in organizing and mobilizing supports? Do you have suggestions on how to overcome some of these obstacles? We have some students watching who may be entering their careers in this. So if you could explain some of the things you had to overcome in terms of organizing. Go ahead, Micah.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest challenge. And I'm just thinking specifically about what we do at the foundation. I'll use the example of UNA, the United Nations Association that I mentioned earlier, and the the advocacy day that we organize here in Washington. And a couple years back, we had kind of a record high attendance. Right before COVID, we had just over 500 advocates come to DC and partake in this day. And, it's really amazing to see them all in front of the Capitol and with UN flags and this kind of stuff and get a great photo. But then when you go into offices and you have, maybe 40 people from California and they're meeting with one, senator, or more likely a, legislative assistant or a legislative director, and you got 40 people that all want to say something or advocate for something. And the good and bad of, talking about the UN is there's just a million different things to cover. Right. And so kind of making sure that they know the importance of speaking with one voice is really important, particularly just in that moment of context. And so that can be hard. But also at the same time, outside of just that one day, giving people all the different resources they need to effectively kind of advocate for the issue that they're focused on. I mean, we've got petitions on our website, our UNA's website, a million different things. And we're constantly being asked to provide education resources to other members that want to kind of talk about different aspects of the UN's work. So that can be hard. And particularly, when a big emergent crisis emerges and there's a lot of conversation and left, right, up, down, and center about it, it can be hard sometimes to make sure that everyone not only feels empowered to talk about it, but feels empowered and understands when they speak. Sometimes they're speaking for the organization and thinking about the future of the organization. So that's something we have to constantly keep in mind when we're kind of coordinating asks and advocacy outreach to ensure that we're kind of uplifting the organization as a whole at the same time.
That's a good point. Sam, anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I would say apathy is always a huge challenge to overcome. I can speak on that in a couple different contexts. Let me first illustrate in political organizing the contrast between something like let's start with the Obama campaign and pick 2008, 2012, doesn't matter. This guy, he was wildly popular. He was, people were fired up, they were excited, they were energized. And that was a benefit, certainly, to his staff. I didn't work on either campaign, but the volunteers show up. They fall out of the sky or grow on trees or whatever, idiom or analogy you want to use. And it's easy because people are enthusiastic. When you've got lots and lots of enthusiastic people showing up, your job's a lot easier. A couple years after that campaign, I worked on a gubernatorial campaign. In an off-year election, people were not fired up. It doesn't mean that the race that I was working on was less important or not important or the stakes were low. It's not that at all. But the enthusiasm was not there, and the volunteers do not show up. You have to pull teeth to get them to show up. And quite frankly, most of the folks that I had show up were state employees who had a very personal stake in the outcome because they were political appointees employed by the state. And if we lost the election, that probably means they were going to lose their job. And in fact, we did lose the election, and most of them did lose their jobs. So they showed up, right? But most folks, were not coming out of a deep personal belief of the importance of what we were doing. And so that made things a lot harder. And it's really, we were able to get some folks by convincing them of the importance of what we were doing. But it's not the same as having folks just, show up out of the blue because they really want to be there. Last night I sat in negotiations for a new contract for a bargaining unit we have downstate. Where we're not getting very far with negotiations. The employer is not moving the needle very much. It's very frustrating. And quite frankly, part of why I think that's happening is because the members in this unit of employees are, not as well organized. They definitely don't want to strike should the need arise. And we don't want it to come to that. But even if, we did, we don't think that they're going to be willing to. And the employer knows it. They can sense that. And, that sort of lack of drive or motivation is really difficult for our organizers down there to overcome. And it's why, quite frankly, we're probably not going to get the strongest contract that, we should. And that's unfortunate, but that's sometimes how it works. We have other agreements where we've got, a really amazing, terms, because we had folks who were, itching to strike and were, really angry and fired up, and the employer got scared. And so they gave in a lot of ground, and that's unfortunately not always the case. So that's always a challenge, is, apathy.
Thank you both for providing some real examples. It as someone who doesn't really work in this line of work, it's very nice to hear some real examples. So thank you both. Moving along, we have a question on data. Can you discuss the importance of data and analytics in your advocacy efforts and how you can use them to help inform your decision making? Micah, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, this is kind of a tricky one sometimes. I think sometimes in DC, in the advocacy space, success means nothing happens. And preventing something from happening can often be just as important as getting something done. And so it's tricky sometimes to prove a negative and to kind of translate that to someone. But so, when that happens, we communicate those successes, quietly to relevant, colleagues here or leadership here. But also, the data and the analytics that we use often is really diverse. So it can be, for example, a member of Congress, introducing a bill that specifically, talks about the UN in a way that, kind of bolsters some support that we need or addresses an issue that's ongoing. So that's really evident and clear. And then, you can count co-sponsors quite easily. Others are a little more fleeting, perhaps. They're statements that are made on the House or Senate floor, statements that are made during hearings, questions or materials that we produce that then members use or reference to kind of fully form their opinion on an issue that relates to the UN. And then, on the other side of things, we have members sometimes that write op-eds or things like this, or just at the end of the day, an appropriations bill that includes an increase for some sort of humanitarian assistance, something that we've been working with the community on. So there's a lot of different kind of points of here and there. It's not just one metric. One, though, we do use that's, pretty easy to count are, letters that get sent, emails that get sent, tweets that get sent to members or others. And then, of course, the folks that come either to New York for a big summit that we do, or then the lobby days I said earlier. So we count those, and we can kind of track those quite easily. But others are a little bit more intangible and kind of require being a little bit more creative in the way you track things, and then how you kind of communicate to people that are maybe overseeing or kind of supervising your work. So there's a lot of different inputs and outputs of it.
Yeah. Sam?
Yeah, sure. There's not, my legal advocacy doesn't really require as much in the way of data and analytics, unless if data and analytics could be utilized to make a legal argument, which doesn't never happen, but it's not as frequent. Then I would say that there's probably a lot less applicability, in the current stage of my career. Although, I would say that union organizers certainly have to, are more likely probably to rely upon that kind of information than I am. In the context of political organizing, yeah, so we used software to gather, voter data and voter information in an ethical way. Of course, I would like to think, and we use that information to allocate resources effectively and appropriately. To give a very straightforward, simple example, the most likely indicator that somebody is going to vote in an upcoming election is whether they voted in the past, right? And so, we don't have, most campaigns don't have an infinite amount of money to work with, and so you gotta allocate resources effectively by going after the folks who you think are most, trying to persuade the folks you think are most likely to vote, trying to, go after the folks who are most likely to vote for you, but might not turn out, and make sure that, they turn out, because, if they do turn out, they'll support your candidate. And, there's lots of, there's algorithmic data and just manually inputted data that can be utilized to, inform voter contact campaigns or field campaigns as to how, best to, maximize, volunteer resources, staff resources, whether it be folks, knocking on doors, making phone calls, in order to, get out as many voters as possible, identify as many, supporters of your candidate or your issue, if you're doing an issue campaign, as possible. So yeah, it definitely applies more in the organizing context, less so in the legal context, unless if, the facts of a specific case would, call for it.
Yeah.
To persuade an arbitrator or a judge that, to support your side.
Yeah, very interesting. I think I'll pause from some of my questions. We have a couple from the audience. One of the questions is, what has been the most impactful or meaningful project that you have been involved with during your tenure in your current role? Micah, would you like to start, or Sam, are you ready to jump in?
Let's give that one to Sam first.
Okay. Well, I can answer the question in two ways. One way is in terms of personal growth as a professional, and the other is just the impact it has had for the people that I do this work on behalf of. And I'll take the time to answer both. For me personally, there's a decision that I just got from the National Labor Relations Board, which, real quick, is the federal administrative agency that has jurisdiction over most collective labor disputes in the private sector in the United States. I don't want to get too deep into any of that, but that's basically what the board is. New Deal era program that's still around today. And so I argued a case before the board against a private entity in the Chicagoland area, we'll say. And the issue, the nature of the dispute is kind of arcane, and it's kind of hard to describe. But it represents something that was a huge, it was important to our members, and represented I think was emblematic of a major, area of focus in labor and employment law that I felt was important. We felt strongly about it. The employer also felt strongly about it from their perspective. So we had a 2-day trial in May that involved 8 witnesses and about 700 pages of testimony when transcribed. I filed like a 50 to 60 page brief. We got a decision back and we clobbered them, and it was great. I thought they were going to appeal. I'm kind of surprised they didn't. And then, we had the election for the members that were organizing. It was a dispute as to how they can organize and how they can, what the format, I guess, of the union they wanted to form could look like. That's basically what it was about. Seems like it's inside baseball. It kind of is, but it's an important issue. It's just hard to explain. And we won, and it was just a very good feeling for me personally, because it was just a major milestone, I think, in professional growth. It was my first, labor board NLRB trial, and it was over an issue that a lot of different legal issues arose out of this. So it involved probably 100 hours of legal research on a variety of different topics, lots of preparation, and there was a lot that went into it. And we won the election last Wednesday, which I'm very happy about, 32-1. So that was a huge area of professional growth for me, and it's probably the biggest thing I've done in my career so far. In terms of things and the members were really happy, but to the issue of direct impact on people. I negotiated the first contract for another newly formed group of employees. It was their first agreement. The first contract is always the hardest to do because you're starting from scratch and kind of, recreating the wheel or creating the wheel. And that it was a 5-6 month long slog. And that doesn't even include the work that was done by the person negotiating it before me, who had to go out on maternity leave. So I took over. And the employer that we were bargaining this contract with was not easy to bargain with. They were tough. They were, it was tough, and we had to do some organizing and, public advocacy to, help us gain some leverage. And, it was not an easy thing to do, but overall, I think we got a really solid contract. The members ratified it like 93-7, I think. Those are percentages. And it resulted in folks getting massive pay increases, lots of, job security and protection, and really good benefits that I think that they offer to more, shall we say, I guess, people that the employer considers to be prestigious employees. The employees that we represent that this employer apparently didn't care about as much now gets the same benefits that they do. So we're all really proud of that. And it's just the impact of that is something I'm really proud of. So sorry if that's a long answer.
Congratulations on those many, many wins. Thank you for sharing. It's great. Micah, how about you?
No, yeah, those are great examples. It makes me just think that while Sam and I, our work is obviously different, at the end of the day, it's kind of the same as, helping regular people or helping, tell their story or advocate for them to live a better life. And I guess, my work is a little less domestic, of course, but I would pull from many of the experiences I have organizing these international learning trips, as I mentioned earlier. And I was in Madagascar earlier this year. And Madagascar right now, it's something just not a top of mind for many people. There's so many crises going on, but it's home in the south of the country to what the UN is calling perhaps the first climate change induced famine, where there just hasn't been rain for 3+ years, where agriculture and growing patterns are just completely disrupted, and people are fleeing their homes because they simply don't have anything to eat. And we brought a group of congressional staff there to the south of the country, a place that there's just no tourism there. There's no reason to go there other than to see something like this. And went to a rural UNICEF health clinic that was staffed by UNICEF nurse practitioners. Just in the middle of nowhere, and met with mothers that, had told us stories of walking 15-20 miles one way to get to the clinic, so that they could have their biweekly checkup with their baby to get the baby weighed. And if the baby's malnourished or underweight, to get emergency, what they call ready-to-use therapeutic food. It's this sort of peanut-based protein that they give to the babies and saves their lives, quite literally. And to see these mothers, the reaction on their face when they get that, and then the others that had came and noticed improvement. It's life-changing of course for them, but then for the staff. And many of these, typically the ready-to-use therapeutic foods and the UNICEF itself, the U.S. is one of the largest financial contributors to UNICEF. So those are U.S. taxpayer dollars at work. And to show for just really pennies on a dollar, the way you can save a life is just, it's amazing. And to see that realization happen in it's happened in other places for me, but in members of Congress or congressional staff, perhaps that may be a little kind of have a preconceived notion of the UN, to see that light bulb go off is really amazing. And so every time that happens is just an immensely rewarding experience and kind of a high that I chase.
Yeah, that is rewarding. And thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Great story. Okay, we have another question. We'll change gears a little bit here. It's from Barbara. How do you handle negative public perception or backlash when advocating for a controversial issue? Would either of you like to start?
Go ahead, Micah.
Sure. We probably both have, kind of, the unions in the UN. There's a lot of perceptions of those. So maybe we kind of dip our toes in the same waters. That's actually, unfortunately, at the core of kind of what we do. The foundation was created a little over 25 years ago to fill a role that wasn't being filled, which is to build public understanding and support for the UN's work. There wasn't an organization like us prior, and it's a role that is really kind of critical. But that means that there's a lot of mis and disinformation about the UN, particularly right now. But many UN agencies have some sort of kind of lingering shadow, and a lot of it, I think, is the UN is by no means a perfect institution. And we try to call out when bad things happen or when reform is needed and things like that. But also, I think a lot of the misperception comes from the fact that I think Americans are deeply, deeply blessed to not have to know what the UN does. When you're waking up in a refugee camp, and I've been to refugee camps of 200,000 people just living in the middle of nowhere in the desert. When you're waking up there, or when you're, getting your lunch from a WFP voucher, and I, met with, refugees that live on $6 a month in Rwanda, from the World Food Program. That is your interaction, you understand what the UN does, and we are very, very blessed to not have to understand that. So a lot of overcoming negative public perception is helping tell those stories and being honest about, the shortcomings of the organization. We like to say we're the UN's best friend, and your best friend tells you when you're doing something right, when they tell you you're doing something wrong, and we try to fill that role as well.
Great. How about you, Sam?
So the very liberating answer, my very liberating answer to the question is that I don't deal with these things, and in terms of public perception, and our union has a communications department, and they do phenomenal, just absolutely amazing work, and make us all look as great as we really are. But no, it's I suppose I could use this question to kind of make a plug for one of the things I love about the legal profession, and public perception. We live in a world with a lot of misinformation and nonsense, and folks who are not necessarily the most informed making decisions that they probably shouldn't be making. And what I love about the law and about legal advocacy is that you can't really make stuff up. You go to a court and make an argument to a judge. You've got an opposing counsel who's going to argue the opposite, and they're going to point out the problems with your argument. You're going to point out the problems with theirs. And you've got a judge their whole job is to be a skeptical person. The arbitrator's job is to be a skeptical person. And so a lot of, one or two sentence messaging, or that stuff doesn't, work in this context. And I think there's something really beautiful about that, I understand there's a, public perception and stereotype about lawyers is that, it's never a straight answer with us. But in a sense, it kind of is, because we can't, we legally we're not, we get in trouble if we actually misrepresent things as part of our jobs. But we also have to, we can't make stuff up. There's nuance to what we argue, but there's lots of scrutiny in everything that we do as well. The profession is rigorous, and I find that both challenging and also rewarding, because we don't, it forces us to be grounded and be able to work with literally only what we can prove, subject to rules involving hearsay and whatever. And I think that's I find that refreshing.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we have a question from Ed in the audience, and he is asking for a Roosevelt University context question. When you were first engaged about this topic, when we three were discussing putting on this webinar, what were some of the knee-jerk ways that you thought that the Roosevelt community could in practical terms, use advocacy with policymakers or thought leaders. Do you want to take a minute to think about that? And we can come right back to that question because we do have something similar. Maybe we'll jump off with. I wanted to ask, what are suggestions you have for young professionals looking to move into advocacy work? And then maybe we'll segue into the Roosevelt community as well. So Sam, do you want to get us started on this one?
Yeah, my advice is the one thing that you can do right now is, if you're not already, is find something outside of the walls of Roosevelt University that you can get involved with, to work on, and network as much as possible. Find a cause that you care about and figure out who in Chicago you need to talk to start working with them. Try to get paid if you can, but if you can't, still try to do it. You will get, that hands-on experience matters immensely. You can make a good impression upon people that you work with. You build up the muscle memory. It could lead to a job after you graduate. You just got to get involved. And, I remember when I was at Roosevelt, we did, there was a lot of advocacy, for MAP grants. It was something that was directly pertinent to a lot of students. And so, I know lots of students would go down to Springfield and they would, learn the basics of advocacy and, having a conversation with a lawmaker and explaining why the issue is important to you. And that's really critical. And it doesn't have to be MAP grants. It could be any topic that you're passionate about. There are other folks who care about those issues, that care about that issue too, from the perspective that you share. Go find them and, see what you can learn.
Great.
Yeah, I think Sam covered it perfectly, the Ed's question about, applying advocacy to the Roosevelt University community. So I don't want to duplicate that, or I don't know if I could speak as well to it. But I would say there's probably it's not a coincidence that Sam and I both have worked in various capacities in political campaigns. For me, that was one of my on-ramps, and was a natural bridge between the job I have now and the job I had previously. So, this is an election, almost an election year coming up in just a couple months. Go and Sam was talking about volunteers. I ran, in addition to setting up offices in South Florida, I ran an office in South Florida. We had about 300 volunteers, and I would grin from ear to ear every time a new person walked in the door. And so, if you're thinking about you want to work in advocacy, or even go to law school or move to DC after graduation to work in kind of the government relations space, starting with a campaign, I think, is really important. Walking in the door, asking how you can volunteer, and I know they will 100% put you to work. And I had many interns that worked for me when I was running an office down in Florida that then came on to DC and now work on the Hill, worked in journalism, and that was perhaps their first kind of experience working in the political space, and they've gone on to do amazing things. So I would start there. There's no shortage of races. It doesn't even have to be congressional. I mean, an alderman's race, many other local school boards and whatnot that you can get involved in and kind of hone those advocacy chops. And I would just say, look also for organizations like UNA USA. There's Sierra Club, or a million different kind of advocacy-oriented organizations that focus on particular issues. I honestly just met a couple of weeks ago. I was meeting with someone who runs government relations for a refugee resettlement organization here in DC, and she reached out because she used to be a UNA member from Missouri, and came to DC during a UNA lobby day and kind of caught the bug, so to speak, and kind of reoriented her whole career. She was already a mid or young professional, and moved it from one direction into this, and now is working in the advocacy space. So also look for those opportunities that other organizations that support your cause or your interests that can kind of help you along those paths.
Wonderful. Yes. Yes to all that. I remember doing internships at nonprofits during my undergrad experience. And if you just say you want to help, they will make room for you. So great. I think we're here at the end of our time. I wonder if either of you have any parting thoughts that we maybe didn't get to, and perhaps you don't. How about you, Micah? Do you have any parting thoughts for the watchers?
Sure. Well, thanks again for organizing this. It's great to be back in touch. And again, just so impressed with everything that Roosevelt has done since I've left. And I know it's a better place than when I left. It was a great place when I left, but continually improving. And, if you're interested in advocacy or jobs, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. I'm a big believer in karma. So anytime anyone asks me about, a recommendation or they want to chat in more detail, I always try to respond or put them in touch with someone that may be more helpful to them than me. And I would love to help do that for other, Roosevelt alums or current students that are interested in that conversation.
Great. Sam?
Yeah, Brittany, thank you for hosting. And, this was a pleasure. I wanted to, the parting advice I want to give is that, if you're interested in advocacy work, hopefully you will find that it is the most fulfilling work that you will ever do. And, I have found, after all these years that, really loving the work that you do and, waking up every day feeling excited to, go in and, and get it done and, help people is one of the best feelings you can have. It's incredibly rare, in my view, for folks to just genuinely love their jobs and to see it as more than just a means to, pay your rent or your mortgage or what have you. And, it leads to a much happier life in my view. And, I really love the work. I'm also happy to, talk with anyone if anyone wants to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn. My email is samwhensel@gmail.com. I'm happy to talk to you if you're interested. If you're interested in maybe going to law school after graduation, I'm happy to talk to you about that too. It is like I said, it really is a rigorous profession, but if your heart's really in it, and if you're willing to persevere through a couple really difficult years of law school, then I definitely encourage it because it's a truly outstanding profession. I really love doing it, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about it who wants to talk about it.
Thank you, Sam and Micah. I really appreciate your time, and I learned so much. Some of the things that are really sticking to me is the speaking with one voice and that snowflake effect concept. So I'm going to try and take some of this with me into what I'm doing. So to close out here, I just want to thank everyone for attending this webinar, and you can find more information on what's coming up in alumni relations at Roosevelt on our website, alumni-giving.roosevelt.edu. You'll find all sorts of upcoming events, including an alumni happy hour on Giving Tuesday in Chicago. And we're going to be launching next semester's webinars starting in February, and then we'll have one February, March, and April. So thank you again. We hope to see you soon, and go Lakers.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.